80,000 beneficiaries of loans granted by the Higher Education Loans Board, that is HELB, are not repaying their loans valued at about 8.2 billion shillings. HELB facilitates access to higher education through provision of loans, bursaries and scholarships to needy students. And the non-payment of loans is a key concern given that HELB draws revenue from loan repayments. The Loans Board has presented a 100% penalty waiver to all defaulters who will repay their loans in one lump sum by the end of June this year. This waiver has been welcomed by a section of loanees, but others feel it's too huge a target given the limited time. This morning in studio, I have Robinson Asman, who is a student leader from the JQuat. Also joining us all the way from KICD is Dr. Andrew Riech, who is a researcher and a lecturer. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to the program. And before I start with you, Robinson, let me start with Daktari there. That is Dr. Andrew Riech. And Daktari, if you could hear me, good morning. Welcome to the program. I've just read an intro there indicating that in Kenya, there are about 81,000 defaulters, and that accumulates to about 8.2 billion Kenya shillings. Does that surprise you in any way? That, you know, a huge, the huge number of defaulters are still there?
Yusuf, thank you. I'm hearing you. Can you repeat that question again, please?
There are about 81,000 loan defaulters out there. That accumulates to about 8.2 billion Kenya shillings. And I'm sure that is a very huge blow to HELB. Why do you think there's a big number of defaulters out there?
Now, thank you. Partly, I think, is because of the ineffective systems of tracking the loanees. And perhaps some of them may not be having jobs, and they also lack commitment to repay their loans. So I think the ball rests with the Higher Education Loans Board.
And I'm going to get a student leader here, Robinson Asman, with me. But before that, let me take our viewers through some infographics that we have for you here, and we explore higher education funding in Kenya. And let's start with the Higher Education Loans Board itself. This is an institution that was started back in the year 1974. And it's the University Loan Scheme. And it has benefited about 645,000 beneficiaries since it started. That is about, in figures, that is about 72 billion Kenya shillings that have been invested. And 10.2 billion shillings is the student financing annual budget. And all over to next infographics. And we're going to look at some of the HELB revenue sources, and they include government exchequer, loan repayments from beneficiaries. Already there are a lot of them who've defaulted. And then there are about 4.1 billion Kenya shillings in cash that have been recovered between the year 2016 and 2017 financial year. 40% of the HELB annual budget have been repaid. But there's still a huge number of loan defaulters out there, as I've already mentioned. And let's take a look at the total number of cash that have been repaid. That is about 16.7 billion shillings total repayment. And about 175,000 beneficiaries have fully repaid their loan. And 47.5 billion worth of shillings have matured accounts, and 396,680 matured loan accounts. And at the moment, there's about 24.5 billion Kenya shillings worth of pending maturity and 264,000 immature accounts. Now, Robinson, as a student leader and as a student from JQuat, I'm sure you have a couple of challenges when it comes to HELB, right?
Yes, yes, of course. And as we discussed earlier, we face a lot of challenges, especially during processing of the loan. You apply for a loan, and there's a huge delay before you get the loan given to you. And sometimes it takes even 4 months. You get into the second semester before you receive the loan from the first semester. And with that loan, you need subsistence from the loan. You need to pay for your fees. And most universities, for you to sit for examination, you need to have completed the entire fee for the entire semester. So sometimes you're forced to postpone your studies to the next academic year simply because HELB delayed in giving the finances to you to continue their studies. And
let me play you back the question that I asked Daktari earlier, that about 81,000 defaulters are still out there. And the Daktari says that, this is majorly because of unemployment. But there are those who are employed already and they're still not paying the loans.
Yeah, mostly in Kenya, what I've seen happening, especially with people who have gone through the education system, you burn the bridges that made you who you are. You forget that you are supposed to mend those bridges for people who are behind you, so that they also benefit from what you benefited from. And we must sensitize our graduates, both recent and people who graduated far much behind. We should sensitize them that this money that they benefited from is also useful for us who are still in the system.
You've talked about the delay in tuition remittances. Perhaps can you tell us if there are any sorts of challenges when, applying for these loans itself is concerned?
During the application, mostly the application is online. So for people who do not have access to maybe the internet, they have a problem. And sometimes they delay too much, especially the new applicants, people who've come from far in the village and need to access centers, market centers where they can get access to the internet, or they can get, and sometimes accessing the HELB website from the phone is not very easy. So you need to find a place with a good computer and good internet access so that you can apply. So that is a very major challenge, which locks out a lot of high school graduates from accessing the loans, and also those who are in the system, those who are in the university, who come from very interior regions that cannot have internet access.
I wish we had a representative from HELB. I'm sure they were supposed to come in and give us an explanation to this. But I still have Dr. Andrew with me. Dr. if you could hear me, it seems we've lost Daktari, and we're going to sort his voice issues shortly. But perhaps let's talk about the funding of HELB itself. There are those who are saying, HELB alone is, we always talk about, the need to achieve the 100% universal higher education financing. Do you think HELB alone can do that?
No, there are many sources of funding. It's not only HELB that benefits students in the university. There are many organizations. The government itself has loans, has bursaries. The county governments have bursaries. So there are very many sources of funding for students, and especially, and if you're in the university, like for our case in JKUAT, we have an office of the Dean of Students where if you have financial problems, you can go and lay them out, and they can see a way in which to assist you, because our policies are that every student should have access to higher education. Those who have been enrolled into the university, they should complete their university studies in the time, in the schedule in which they are supposed to complete. So there are many sources. You can feel free to contact your administrations from each and every university to see the sources of funding, and even for postgraduate studies, if you want to partake masters, if you want to take up PhD studies, there are many sources of funding. You can just get the information from your universities.
Clearly. Now let's talk about the loan recovery. Of course, this is something that HELB is trying to do over and over again, and right now they have some sort of 100% waiver for defaulters out there who are going to pay in a lump sum. Do you think this can in a way encourage students like you've graduated to repay these loans?
I think only those who can afford such lumps, such huge amounts of money.
Depending on how much you got from HELB.
Depending on how much, Because personally, I think I've gotten in excess of, let's say, 200,000 Kenyan shillings. I'm also a beneficiary of HELB. I've gotten a lot of money from them. And paying that huge sum of money just before June is next month. Getting that money before June, it's quite impossible. For
I understand we have Daktari with us, back with us. He's joining us all the way from the KICD. Now, Dr. Andrew, we've been talking about the need to achieve the 100% universal higher education in Kenya. Do you think HELB by itself can achieve this, or other players should also come in?
Well, I think when we talk about higher education, that includes mid-level colleges and other tertiary institutions, including universities. The problem in Kenya has been that there's a high premium attached to university education to the detriment of these other institutions, vocational, technical and vocational institutions, such that there's a clamor for degrees, actually what we may call very high social demand for degrees, which makes it rather difficult because funding of universities has to take into account three elements. One, adequacy of resources, efficiency in the management of those resources, which includes transmission to needy students, to institutions that require them, and finally equity, which is to do with fairness with which those resources are distributed. And evidently, from what I know and what I've heard other people have talked in this meeting, is there are inefficiencies nearly in all stakeholders that are involved, including the Higher Education Loans Board, as well as universities. So we may need to reflect on, we may need to embark on a journey to strengthen TVET as well as university education so that we don't focus only on university education. Otherwise, the first element of funding of education, namely adequacy, will still be a challenge.
About funding from the Treasury, to be specific this time around, there are those who are saying HELB is not that effective because they're getting insufficient funding from the Treasury. Do you think there's a need to deepen financial status of this kind of a scheme?
Well, as I've said, that is critical. It has to be done. But as I've just said, it's important that we improve efficiency, the second element of education financing. Without increasing efficiency in even identifying needy students, remitting those resources to needy students at the right time, and ensuring that those who have benefited are repaying, which is an important thing that has to be done. And of course, we need to also increase funding. But it was supposed, the Higher Education Loans Board was set up to create a revolving fund, which means once funds have been collected from those who have benefited, the same are allocated to other beneficiaries, as well as looking for ways of diversifying sources of revenue for the Higher Education Loans Board.
And Dr. Andrew, let's talk about foreign students, because these are also Kenyans who are going to foreign universities. At the moment, is HELB, giving out cash or bursaries to these kind of students?
Sorry?
I'm saying there are also Kenyans who are in foreign universities. There are students from Kenya who are studying in foreign universities, in
Yes.
other universities outside the country. So at the moment, is HELB funding such students?
Well, I am not very, very sure. The statistics, I think, are to be collected or, to be given by the Higher Education Loans Board. But what I know is that the current funding basket is not adequate even for students who are studying in local universities. So, meaning that the adequacy element of education funding has not been met. So I think we need to increase that basket through various measures, including ensuring collecting of those who have funds from repayment, enhancing repayment of those funds, and increasing the grants from Treasury, which of course raises issues regarding the adequacy of funds to even other sub-levels of education. So it's a big challenge which may be affecting the national goal, or the goal of universal higher education.
Dr. Andrew Riechi, for your input there. He is a researcher and a lecturer. And still in studio, I have Robinson Asman, who is the student leader from JKUAT. One final question. As a student, are you satisfied on how HELB is operating at the moment?
No, I must say that we are not satisfied as students, because at the moment we are getting between 35,000 and 60,000 from HELB, depending on the level of need. But this is not sufficient for us, because that money is given to you for a whole year. How do they expect you to sustain yourself in the university? You need to eat, you need to learn, you need to buy books, you need materials for your education. So the money is not enough at all. And we also want to appeal to the government, increase the capacity for HELB, because as students we need that money, and there are students who come from very rural areas, people who their parents and their guardians have to sell off property to bring them to the university. And the government is investing in the youth. How do they say to be investing in the youth while we cannot afford to sustain the youth in the universities? So HELB increase the capacity for the universities. Let's say from between 50,000 to about 100,000.
At the moment, how much are they issuing? Around 45?
35 to 60,000 per year.
60,000 per year.
And that should be maybe per semester. Yeah,
Thanks.
That can only be enough for
Thank you, Robinson Asman, for that. Of course, we do hope they are going to listen to some of the things you've raised. And unfortunately, we couldn't get a representative from HELB this morning. And still at this hour, still have